So welcome everyone. My name is Alex McVey. I'm the Director of Debate at Kansas State University. And today I'm going to be talking about an aspect of debate that I think is really important, but that is often something that we neglect when thinking about how to coach our students, when we think about some of the best ways to prepare our students for debate success. People often say that 90% of debates are won before the debate ever begins. And there's a lot of truth to this. Pre-round preparation through research, block writing, speech redos are all major keys to debate success. And we spend a ton of time thinking about the content that goes into debates, how we construct our cases, what kinds of arguments, what research, what evidence we want to use. But it's also really important to help debaters think about how to mentally prepare for debates. How we execute and perform in debates matters. Meaning managing competition anxiety, using your emotions to your advantage, keeping a clear head. All of these are crucial aspects of competitive debate success. Debate, like any competitive activity, involves managing your own mind, and debate especially so, given that it is such a mentally taxing activity. But fortunately, you can develop tools, and there are tools that we can help our debaters develop to keep your mental game strong in debate rounds. And we're going to discuss some of those mental tools today. So this talk is going to cover a little bit about competition anxiety and how to manage it, mindfulness and emotional awareness. We're going to talk about major mindful moments in the debate, particular moments in a policy debate round that call for a little bit of extra mindfulness in terms of competitive approach. We'll talk about why champions have short memories and talk about dealing and navigating with mistakes. And then finally, we're going to talk about managing self-talk as a crucial aspect of creating a competitive psychology and an affirming psychology for debaters. Now, before I dive in, I want to caveat all of this by saying that I'm not a professional psychologist by any means. I have a doctoral degree in communication studies, not in psychology. I am absolutely not that kind of doctor. And so there are tips and tricks that might work here that might not necessarily work for your debaters. And debaters might have needs that go above and beyond this in terms of accessibility, in terms of finding other mental resources that work for them and their unique needs. And so this is not universally applicable, but these are some tips that I have found and that I've cultivated through years of studying competitive psychology from a coaching aspect that have helped me reach my debaters. So, what is performance anxiety? Many debaters struggle with performance anxiety, nerves approaching either during or before a debate round. And this is totally normal. In fact, competition is supposed to be anxiety producing, right? Anxiety is a natural byproduct of any event where we have heightened awareness of an event with serious implications in our lives. And so competition, any element where there is a forced winner and loser, where there is a clash of intellects, where debaters are putting their reputation on the line in terms of in a competitive sense, right? There's obvious reasons why that would be anxiety producing, and that's totally normal. And in fact, anxiety can be useful. Frequently, anxiety helps us tap into our fight or flight mechanisms, and anxious energy can spur action and can also be channeled into heightened forms of performance, right? When we are anxious, we can use that anxious energy to our advantage. The downside with this, of course, is something that is called emotional flooding, right? When you are overwhelmed with anxiety, when anxiety overcomes you in such a way that it becomes detrimental to your performance in a debate round or to your debater's performance in a debate round. Emotional flooding takes the body out of automatic execution mode, what we might call debate muscle memory or preparation in action, right? We want debaters to be able to tap into their practice, right? Into all of the things that they learn during a practice session. You want debaters to be, in some ways, going through things, you want their performance to be automatic in certain ways, or tapping into well-rehearsed preparation that they have done before the debate. But competition anxiety can sometimes knock debaters out of that prepared mode. And it does that. It causes us to make mistakes by taking us out of the present moment. And so a big part of managing performance anxiety is trying to figure out ways to bring debaters back into the moment or into the space of the debate round. It's not bad to feel things in debate. Emotions such as anxiety are normal. And the key is channeling emotions in a productive way. Emotions are information and we can learn from them, right? We can learn that we need to be paying extra special attention, that we need to be performing at the top level in response to that background level of performance anxiety. Or if an argument that we hear in a debate round or your debaters hear in a debate round makes them angry or upsets them in some way, you can channel that into the ethos of your speech, into your public speaking style, into your emotional appeals to the judge. And so emotions are a form of information. But frequently, our emotions do something else. Competitive anxiety does something else for debaters in a temporal sense. That is, it dislodges them from the present moment. It moves them either in a future-focused way of having anxiety about what is to come, i.e., I'm afraid of having to give this speech, or it makes them past-focused. They dwell on the fact that they've just made a mistake. And both of these things take us out of the present moment. The key is learning how to respond to your emotions rather than react to them. And this involves careful practices of mindfulness, being present in the moment. One of the subtitles of this talk was, what can Phil Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Serena Williams teach us about how to win debates? Well, I've got a quote up here from Phil Jackson's book, 11 Rings, which is a fantastic book if you are just interested in coaching, competitive psychology. I would absolutely recommend any coach go buy this book and read it, because there are a bunch of fantastic anecdotes about team management in this book. And Phil Jackson is known for bringing sort of non-traditional techniques into his basketball locker room. And one of those techniques was mindful meditation. And so here's a quote from the book. Once college basketball coaches Dean Smith and Bobby Knight came to a Lakers game and asked me, "Is it true, Phil, that you and your players sit around in a dark room before games and hold hands?" All I could do was laugh. Though mindfulness meditation has its roots in Buddhism, it's an easily accessible technique for quieting the restless mind and focusing attention on whatever is happening in the present moment. This is extremely useful for basketball players who often have to make split-second decisions under enormous pressure. I also discovered that when I had players sit in silence, breathing together in sync, it helped align them on a nonverbal level far more effectively than words. One breath equals one mind. And I really appreciate Phil Jackson's approach to using the breath as a tool for mindfulness in competitive activities. And that's something that I try to work with my debaters on a lot. So how do we remain mindful, present, and centered when we're in the middle of a fierce debate competition? One of the keys to doing this is through the breath. The breath is the body's reset mechanism. It allows us to connect and ground ourselves in the present moment, and deep breathing can actually help level out some of our stress levels, some of the chemicals in our body that are producing stress and causing us to freak out in a competitive situation. Deep breathing can help you regain control over some of the physiological things that are going on in your body, sometimes, for some folks. So it's when we feel ourselves getting anxious in a debate round, or when you know that your debaters are getting anxious in a debate round, always remind them to return to their breath. Focus on taking 2 or 3 really big, deep breaths. You want to focus on filling your body and your chest with air and trying to breathe out all of that stress. And as you're doing this, pay attention to your body, to your body's feelings, to your emotions. Don't judge yourself for them. Don't immediately react to them. Don't notice them. What are they telling you? How can you respond mindfully to those emotions? Mindfulness is a muscle. It takes a while to get good at this and to learn how to use mindfulness as an intentional tool in debates. And so it's also important, like working out any other kind of muscle, to use repetition and practice, to try doing a little bit every day, to try integrating a little bit of it into your debate practices, into debate moments, and also to try to practice mindful breathing at key moments in the debate. Now, the first one of these moments is before the debate. Try to stop prepping new things with your debaters at least 1 to 2 minutes before the debate begins, and try to get them to focus to just take a few deep breaths and center themselves in the moment. Make sure they're mindful, make sure they're present, make sure they're thinking about the debate in front of them. They're thinking about each moment individually rather than trying to rush forward throughout, and to really be mindful about what's going on in the debate. And then the next is during prep time itself. I feel like this happens frequently with the contemporary era of paperless debate, where debaters will get a little bit lost in their computers during prep time, digging through files to try to find cards before they really know what they need to say. And so it's important to use prep mindfully. Figure out what you need to prep before you get lost in your files. Write the 1 to 2 smart analytical arguments you need to say on your flow before you start trying to find and organize cards. Sometimes our effort is we tend to react to whatever is going on previous to prep rather than respond. And we really want to try to think carefully and mindfully about how do we use that prep in a smart and mindful way. And while I think it's important to use mindfulness in every aspect of prep time, there are a few crucial moments in the debate when I think it's especially important, and I will break each one of those down individually. So the first of these is when you are giving, or your debaters are giving, a 1NC in a debate where there is a new affirmative. So just so you'll understand kind of what kind of traditional debate norms are about this. You might be familiar with the case list, with the wiki, which is where people post their cases, what they're going to read, and so before a debate round, the negative will come in and say, "What affirmative are you reading?" The affirmative will say, it's on the wiki. It's this, such and such ath with such and such plan text and such advantages. But if it is an affirmative that has not been read by that team before, they might say, it's new AF. It's new AF, we don't have to disclose to you. And so that situation can be stress-inducing for some negative debaters. Many times, debaters are used to pulling out a stock 1NC shell for most rounds and maybe thrown off of their game by somebody reading a new AF. In fact, that's kind of the whole point of reading a new affirmative, is to get you out of your zone and off of muscle memory. But learning to be mindful can help you respond to the challenge of the new affirmative rather than react. And so the first thing that I recommend my debaters do when they are hearing a new affirmative, after the 1AC gets done, is to use deep breaths during prep time to calm the nerves, and then look at the AF holistically. Don't get bogged down in minute details. You might see your debaters, their first impulse is to read the evidence in micro detail, which is okay for affirmatives that you kind of have an idea of what they're doing. But I would say before you start digging into the particulars of the evidence, you want to take a look at the whole flow. Flow the entire speech, take notes on the entire speech, and then look at all of your notes holistically. Step out of the document a little bit and don't get bogged down in minute details. Ask yourself mindful questions like, what is this affirmative about? What is its impact? How does it claim to solve it? What is the big picture for this affirmative? Most new affirmatives follow some type of typology. Even if you haven't seen this affirmative, you've likely seen an affirmative like it. Figure out how it is similar to other arguments you are prepared for. So, is it topical? You probably have a disad that links to it. If not, topicality is probably a good 2NR choice. Does it use the United States federal government? If so, you probably have critiques of USFG action or a counterplan that uses an alternate actor. If not, you can probably use a defense of the state plus framework to generate some kind of offense. Does it have an impact? If so, you might be able to impact turn it. If not, then you should probably make some kind of presumption argument. And finally, think logically. What are one or two of the most true and obvious analytical, i.e. not carded evidence, arguments that you can make about this case? These non-carded analytical arguments are often the best, most common sense arguments that judges are dying to hear extended in the 2NR. The next big moment in mindful moments of prep is prep before the 2AC. One of the biggest challenges of being a second affirmative constructive is handling a big, diverse set of 1NC offense against your case. And this is kind of one of the mental tricks of a 1NC that says something like, the order will be 9 off in case. Part of what they're trying to do there is to just freak the 2AC out a little bit. This often causes emotional flooding. 2ACs will freak out about new arguments or the sheer quantity of arguments and will start reacting rather than responding. And so for my 2ACs who are looking at a big, diverse set of offensive 1NC arguments, after the 1NC gets done, I like to encourage them to take a few big, deep breaths and then look at the 1NC holistically. Ask yourself, how many viable 2NR worlds are there? Which of these 9 off-case arguments can be combined into some kind of winning package of 2NR arguments? Where can I save time by making smart, logical arguments rather than reading more cards? Where are there tensions between 1NC arguments that I can exploit to my advantage? And for each off-case position, does this position attempt to solve the case or turn the case? And how might I win my case in light of the chosen negative strategy? How do I take the parts of my case and answer the way that they have attempted to approach my case? And these all involve mindful, intentional prep practices that involve trying to figure out what the whole debate looks like rather than trying to chase the negative around on each individual part. Right, a big part of all kind of debate strategy is making sure you play on your territory. And part of doing that when you're affirmative against a big, diverse negative strategy is figuring out what's the simple, easy relationship between my AF and their AF. And part of how you do that is by being mindful and avoiding the emotional flooding that can happen when a giant 1NC is read against you. The next mindful moment to coach about is 1AR prep. 1AR prep is another common moment of emotional flooding. And that's because the whole purpose of the negative block is to overwhelm the 1AR with arguments. The strategic benefit the negative gets is putting 13 minutes of time pressure on a 5-minute speech. So this can be really difficult for people who are just learning how to give the 1AR, right? How do I get up and respond to all of these things to say? I only have 5 minutes and I've got a whole constructive and another rebuttal to respond to. That moment itself can overwhelm debaters. And so of course, going back to first principles here, the first thing you do after the negative block is done is to take a few moments to calm the breath and then think holistically about the negative block. How many winnable 2NR worlds are still available in the negative? Were there any places where the negative was redundant or where they spent lots of time developing arguments that you don't need to contest in order to win? For example, did they spend a ton of time on a link when your primary argument is that the case outweighs the impact? And then ask yourself, what are the 1 or 2 best arguments that you have against each winnable world? Write those arguments down on your flow before doing any other prep. And it's important to remember here that the job of the 1AR is not to react to every piece of block offense. You are structurally barred from doing so. There is simply not enough time in the 1AR to respond to everything that the negative says. Instead, the job of the 1AR is to respond rather than react to the whole of the negative block by giving your 2AR a winning package of offensive arguments. Ask yourself, what are the basic things you need to do in order to win that you solve a bigger impact than the negative? Those are key steps to mindfully approaching prep time in the 1AR. The last big mindful moment in the debate, the place where mindful meditation practices are most important, is before the 2NR. People always say the 2NR, the second negative rebuttal, is the hardest speech in debate. This is because you have to make a difficult decision about which is your best winning package of arguments. All of those 9 off case, perhaps, from the 1NC have now got to be boiled down into 1 or 2 main winning positions that go with one another and form a consistent and coherent package of arguments that you can extend for the entirety of these 6 minutes. In other words, the 2NR is one of the most mentally taxing speeches in debate. It is almost all about things that happened in the debate and forces you to make decisions that are context dynamic and not always dependent on your pre-round preparation strategies. And so it's important to, at the start of 2NR prep, take a few moments to center the breath and make a mindful 2NR decision. Ask yourself, which one of my off-case positions or case turns gives me the best chance of winning the debate? Which position am I most comfortable extending? Which position did the affirmative have the least amount of offense? Which position gives me the best holistic answer to the key impacts the affirmative is likely to extend? What is my impact? What is their impact? And why does my impact outweigh? And if you take time to think mindfully about these questions in prep, that is key to making good 2NR decisions in debates. So our first sort of celebrity interlude here was Phil Jackson. We're now on Patrick Mahomes, who all of the, here at K-State, we're obviously big Kansas City Chiefs fans. Patrick Mahomes, in an interview in Sports Illustrated, said, "I remember my first NFL interception vividly. I remember going to the bench and just sitting there and thinking, well, you got that out of the way. I had been feeling jumpy and jittery and really excited when the game started. And after that interception, it's almost like it settled me down and helped me get me back into the mindset of not trying to do too much. Those things happen in the NFL, but as a quarterback, you have to minimize those. You have to have a short memory and go back out there and act like nothing happened." Patrick Mahomes, the Super Bowl winning quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, is known for having a photographic memory, remembering every play, every pass, every interception, every page of the playbook, and that can be an important skill. So why is Patrick Mahomes in this quote talking about the importance of having a short memory? Well, I'll use an anecdote to explain this. In 2020, the Kansas City Chiefs played the Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers. Late in the game, we're talking late third quarter, early fourth quarter, Mahomes threw interceptions to give San Francisco a 10-point lead. And this is what you see on the right-hand side here in my slideshow, this meme, San Francisco with a 20-10 lead in the fourth quarter. 15 minutes later, they were down 20-31. Mahomes quickly forgot about his mistakes, focused on the plays in front of him, and went on to carry his team to a 31-20 victory. And this is why it's so important for champions to have a short memory. The art of a short memory is an important part of competitive psychology, and people talk about this all the time in golf, tennis, especially individual sports, where you're really thinking about just your own individual performance, but also on team sports as well. And debaters tend to be very competitive people. They like to beat themselves up when they make mistakes, which is a form of emotional flooding. We make a mistake and we feel guilty. We make a mistake and we judge ourselves. We think negative thoughts about our own abilities, and oftentimes these thoughts dominate. We tend to focus on past mistakes, which means we're not being mindful, present, and centered. And this is exactly what causes mistakes to compound. When we allow ourselves to dwell on past mistakes, we're less likely to think clearly about what needs to be done in the present moment. Then we make more mistakes, and it becomes a vicious cycle. The thing is, you have absolutely no control over the past. It's done. It's gone. There's literally nothing you can do to change the result, to change what you just said in cross-examination. You said it. The vote was in. It's happened. You can only control what is in front of you in the present. So when you find your mind wandering into the past, or if you notice your debaters fixating on mistakes in the past, either in a tournament or after a tournament, try to encourage them to return to their breath. Ask them to notice their thoughts and respond to them rather than judging or reacting to them. Ask them if they can learn anything useful from that mistake. Is there something they can do now to adjust? And there are two specific times, and I will go over strategies for each of these in turn, but there are two specific times when it pays to have a short memory in debate. The first is in round after a mistake, and the second is post round after a tough loss. So let's talk about in round. You're in round and you just made a mistake. Cross-ex just got done and you think you said something that damaged your case, or you were unable to respond to a question the way you wanted. Or let's say the 2AC just got done and timer's going off and you realize that you just dropped one of the case turns or you undercovered a disad. What do? Well, the first thing is you need to do everything in your power to not dwell on the mistake. You can't control it, but what you can control is how you respond. Next is don't let them see you sweat. There is a very good chance that your judge doesn't think the mistake was as fatal as you thought it was until you give them nonverbal cues that make you think you messed up. The key, though, is getting yourself back into the present moment, to shake it off somehow. I recommend that my debaters have what's called a mistake mantra. Give yourself some words. Practice saying these words. Write them down. Put them down on a sticky note on your computer or in one of your files that you use all the time, and make it your mistake mantra. If you find yourself making a mistake, say, okay, I got that out of my system. Or that's okay, we can fix that. Or lots of speech time left to go. Something to take you out of the past moment and into the present. And the reason why you want to be in the present moment is so that you can respond mindfully. Don't react to the mistake, respond mindfully. Ask yourself or teach your debaters when they make a mistake to ask themselves a mindful question. How might I need to change something about one of my future speeches in order to make up for this mistake? Do I need to cover something different? Do I need to spend a little bit more time on a different sheet of paper? Do I need to spend more time in cross-examination on it? And adjust accordingly if there are concrete things you can do to address the mistake. The next thing is to ask, what are some things that you did well in the speech that you can focus on to recover from the mistake? And I think one thing debaters don't realize is that when they make a mistake in a speech, it tends to be 20 or 30 seconds of the speech. And they think, oh my gosh, that's the end of it, right? I've made a mistake, therefore nothing was good about that speech. And that's almost always false. It tends to be that there were 30 seconds of a mistake and 7 minutes and 30 seconds of some good things going on, of good, solid arguments. And the key to recovering from a mistake in a debate round is to focus mindfully on what the things that were going on that you did well in order to advance those things further on in the debate. And the reason why this is so key is because as long as there is speech time, there is still a path to victory. As long as you still have time to talk to the judge, you still have the opportunity to win that debate, no matter how bad the mistake was. I always tell the story. This was at JV Nationals last year or 2 years ago, something like that. I walk into one of my debaters' rooms post-round. I go, hey, how'd that debate go? The 2AC looks at me and they say, I don't think it went so well. We dropped topicality in the 2AC. And, that tends to be a pretty bad, damning mistake. If you drop topicality, it's really hard to recover from that error because you've admitted your case is not topical and the judge should vote against you. Come back 5-10 minutes later, the RFD is done, and they go, we won that debate. And I go, okay. And they go, yeah, we went for our critique impacts in the 1AC outweigh topicality, and that the rhetorical violence of a thing that they did outweighed the unfairness of topicality, and the judge voted for it because the 2NR didn't have a great answer to it. And so there are a lot of lessons to take from this. The first is that just because you made a mistake does not mean that your opponents won't also make a mistake. And if you're too busy fixating on your past mistake, you're not paying attention to the potential mistakes that your opponent is making. Additionally, you can give a speech later on that is good enough that your mistake won't matter. You get to also tell the judge what parts of the debate matter. And so if you think you made a mistake in one part of the debate, try refocusing the debate on an area why you are winning and tell the judge why that is more important than any other issue in the debate. And finally, confidence is king. Debaters like to think that their judges are perfect argument evaluating critics, that they can look at a flow and rationally break down who won or lost the debate based entirely on what happened on the flow and on the quality of argumentation. The problem is, we as coaches know this is not true. Debate judges are subjective. All debate is an intersubjective activity. And evaluating debate inevitably involves a little degree of your own evaluation of the ethos of the debaters, of your perception of how they are doing. And those perception issues can weigh heavily in your mind when you're trying to make sense of your flow and the arguments that happen after the debate. And so maintaining confidence, not showing your judge that you are fixated on your own mistake, that you think this debate is unwinnable for yourself, that is going to be crucial to recovering to a mistake in the debate round. And it's one of the reasons why having a short memory, if you have a mistake, brush it off, move on to the next thing, exude confidence, and try to recover in whatever way you can. And teaching that skill is going to get your debaters a bunch more ballots than if they crumble when they make mistakes. The next crucial time when it is key to have a short memory in debate is after the round. So let's say you just lost a debate. Your debaters just lost a debate. Maybe they thought they were going to win the debate and they are shocked, disappointed, or surprised that they didn't. That seems to happen quite a bit. Or perhaps they just got crushed by a fantastic team that's years older than them, wilier than them, or had an argument that they were just unprepared for. And then the debaters start feeling like they just aren't good enough. Both of these responses are understandable, but they're also forms of emotional flooding. It's a way of dwelling on the past and not being mindful, centered, and present. It's important to remind debaters that nothing they can do in the present will change the result of a debate that already happened. Instead, it's important to focus on what you can control, which is the next round in front of you. Next is don't blame yourself and don't blame your partner. And the big pragmatic reason why this is true, even if you want to, and even if you think you're right, is you both have to debate with each other next round, and being judgmental of each other is not a good headspace to win debates. You're not going to be in a good headspace if you're judging yourself and blaming yourself in debates, and you're not going to be in a good headspace if you're judging your partner and blaming your partner, and they're not going to be in a good mental headspace with you, and it's going to affect everyone's confidence moving forward. So, how do we approach a loss? The mantra here is the same. Don't react to the loss, respond to the loss. And what that means is ask yourself, or have your debaters ask themselves, is there a concrete thing that they can do before the next debate to prevent a loss like this from happening again? Let's say they just did not have a response to an argument. Well, we've got 20 minutes before this next debate. Can you take 5 minutes and write a 4-point block of the best 4 logical arguments that we can write against this thing? And it's not perfect, it's not complete. You'll want to go research that after the tournament, or find cards after the tournament, but we don't have time for that now. We got to go get lunch, or we got to stand up and, go to a different room, or even just, I've been sitting in front of Zoom for the past 3 hours. You got to get up and stand up and walk around, right? You may not have time for that, right? So ask, what is a concrete thing that I can do to not let a loss like this happen again? And then move on. And if there's not a concrete thing you can do immediately in that time, have a post-tournament to-do list. Keep that to-do list running, add it to the list, and address it after the tournament. And mentally, teach your debaters that once it's on their list of, I know I need to fix this, that's time to stop dwelling on it. You can't fix it right then, right? It's on your list. You can put it in the past. Okay, that's good. We recognize it happened. We recognize the mistake occurred. We are responding to that mistake rather than letting that mistake dominate our mental headspace. And this, I think, is the next important aspect of reacting to a loss, is change your headspace. If you have time, get up and walk around. Do some deep breathing. Go outside and stand in the sunshine. Watch your favorite TikTok video or listen to whatever song makes you happy. If there are any kind of things that you can do that give you a positive mental cue, a little burst of positive energy, do those things and get yourself out of that mental headspace, that cycle of feeling guilty for a mistake that you just made. Another way to do this is to figure out a post-loss mantra. Have your debaters write down a post-loss mantra for them of what happens if we lose the debate, right? And after the decision, have them say it out loud to each other. It could be something like, okay, on to the next one, or shake it off, we've got a debate to win, or that's okay, we've got this next one. Something that provides them with a verbal and emotional cue that it is time to move on and recenter in the present moment because you cannot control the past. Our third and final celebrity sports interlude here is Serena Williams. And I've pulled some quotations here from the notebook that Serena uses in between matches at Wimbledon. She has a notebook with affirmations on it. And these notebooks say things like, you will move up, you will add spin, you are number one, you will win Wimbledon. Serena Williams is known as one of the most physically gifted athletes on earth. Incredibly strong, fast, technically gifted at tennis. However, she has also earned a reputation for her mental toughness. And one of the successes that she talks about a lot is positive self-talk. And those affirmations that we just saw are something that she engages in as daily practice. She writes positive affirmations about her own performance goals and reviews them in between matches. These affirmations focus both on concrete things she wants to do in the match, like you will add spin, and more generally provides positive affirmation about her own beliefs, such as you are number one. Right? And so these positive affirmations are all a big part of developing positive self-talk and cutting out negative self-talk, which is a huge part of teaching debaters mental resilience and also just a good life skill for debaters to learn. We are often having conversations with ourselves without even knowing it. These conversations are our self-talk. And frequently our self-talk is negative. We spend time judging ourselves, talking about what we can't do, dwelling on our past mistakes or our perceived failures. And these forms of negative self-talk are destructive. They sap us of our confidence. They take us away from being present, centered, and mindful. So, how do we beat negative self-talk? First, and I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but the first key is always the same. Be mindful. Return to the breath. When you find negative thoughts taking over, take a deep breath, notice them, and return to the present. Another tip is to reframe mistakes. We tend to make mistakes. We tend to frame or talk about mistakes or think about mistakes as if they are judgments on our character as people rather than our actions. We like to catastrophize mistakes rather than putting them in context. So when a debater says something like, God, I'm always dropping arguments, I'm so bad at debate, one way to rephrase that is, I dropped an argument in that last 2AC. I think if I flow better and work on time management, I can probably fix that. And so the crucial thing here is that you're trying to shift conversation away from identity towards action, because action is fixable. Action is contingent. You can choose a different action next time. You can do something slightly different. But when we convince ourselves that our past mistake is a reflection of who we are as people, it's much harder to change who you are. Right? It's much harder for me to not be Alex McVey, a guy with brown hair. Right? When you define an identity characteristic, it becomes non-malleable. It becomes fixed. It becomes something that you then get trapped into a cycle of thinking because it was that way in the past, it is always going to be that way in the future. Right? And we want to get into a space of mindfulness about the present, because the present is the space that we have agency in to transform the world. It is the space of contingency and action, right? So reframe mistakes and to not be about identity. And next, here's another tip when you're dealing with negative self-talk, is to ask, how would my best friend talk about me? Or if a debater is getting down on themselves because of their performance at a tournament, ask, what would your best friend say to you if they were trying to cheer you up? And try using some of that language, right? Would your best friend ever say, God, you're so stupid at this because you dropped an argument in the 2AC? Of course not, right? They would say, that's okay, everyone makes mistakes, you can bounce back next time, right? And so try asking your debaters what they think their best friend would say and use some of that language on themselves to actually speak that language of this imaginary best friend out into the world. Finally, stop negative self-talk when you see it. I've got a sign hanging up in the K-State squad room that says no negative self-talk. Don't allow others on your team to talk bad about themselves. Create a culture of positive self-talk. When you see people talking bad, and when you see a debater talking bad on themselves, always try to reframe, right? And you don't have to be in denial about the fact that a debater made a mistake in order to do this, right? But try to reframe in a way that's positive, in a way that is about changing actions rather than defining identity, and in a way that's hopeful and gives debaters hope and space for change, because that is more pedagogically valuable and will help them create resilient mental toughness in a debate. And finally, if we're going to defeat a culture of negative self-talk, it's probably important to help develop rituals of positive self-talk. So one of the things that I like to do with my debaters after a tournament is I like to have them do a ritual at the beginning of our meeting where they talk about what they did well and what their partner did well. So often when we think about constructive criticism, we think about, oh, well, the judge told us I needed to do this better and I needed to do this better. The judge told me I messed up on this and I messed up on this, right? And when you're focusing just on those things, you're only focusing on the bad. Right, but it's really important for debaters to keep an inventory of the things they do well and to focus on those traits in order to bring out the best of those performances. And so you want to try to think of ways to tap into those traits in debate rounds. I speak fast and clear. That's a great thing for a debater to do. How can you tap into that to make your rebuttals sharper, to make your time management better? I am good at answering cross-ex questions. That's awesome. And how do you take those great answers to cross-ex questions and start using them to think about what the rest of the debate will look like on the basis of strategic concessions and cross-examination? I know my 1AC like nobody else. That's awesome. That probably also means that you're going to be great when it comes to comparing your evidence to the negatives evidence, right? And so these are positive inventories that debaters can do in order to think about the things they are good at when they are caught in cycles of self-doubt and negative self-talk. And the next is, just like Serena Williams with her notebook, try to encourage your debaters to develop and use mantras before their speech. So I've got a debater I've been working a lot with on clarity issues, just making sure that their speech comes across as crystal clear, and avoids some of the bad clarity issues that you get when when debaters are trying to speak too fast. And so one of the mantras I've been helping them develop before they give their speech is to just mentally say to themselves, this speech is going to be crystal clear, or I am going to be crystal clear at the start of this speech. If a debater is struggling with 2NR confidence and is always unsure about their choice, just have them practice saying to themselves before they get up for the 2NR, I am confident in my 2NR choice. I am confident in my 2NR choice. And eventually some of these positive affirmations are going to breed some actual in-round confidence that will translate into dubs, that will translate into victories that will help them gain more confidence, and it can snowball. Start this speech fierce. I have a lot of debaters who like to start speeches slow and not really in gear. And so and I do this in speech redos too. I'll say, okay, I'll stop them after about a minute. I'll go, stop, next. I want you to think to yourself, I'm going to start this speech fierce. I'm going to start this speech fierce. Okay. Another one is, this speech can win me the debate. This speech can win me the debate. I'm going to win the entire debate with this 5-minute speech that I'm about to give right here. I'm going to win the debate in the 2AC right here by ending the 1NC's hope of establishing any offense against our case, right? A positive mantra to encourage your debaters before the debate round so that they are thinking positively and have an inbuilt set of tools that they have practiced to defeat negative self-talk with positive affirmations and positive intentional self-talk that is targeted towards specific things that your debaters are working on in debates. That's the scope of my talk. So if I were coming away with 4 key takeaways here, the first would be mindfulness is key. Don't dwell on the past or worry about the future, because you can only control the present. Next is use your breath to reset. Our breath is the key to controlling our emotions and using them productively. Third is have a short memory. You can't change the past, but you can refuse to let it dictate the present. And then finally, use positive self-talk to defeat negative self-talk. I am happy to answer any questions that might come up in the chat. I just switched over to the chat, Sophia. I like L is for learning and learning is for us. And so I am happy to answer any more questions that you might have in the chat for me. Ooh, how do you deal with a partnership where one student is more affected by losses than the other? That's a really good one. So I think one thing to do is to try to see if you can get a little bit of the infectious energy of one to wear off on the other. And one way to do this is to encourage the debater who has a little bit more of the mental resilience, who doesn't take the losses as tough, to try to do some positive reframing immediately after the debate. To take things that the one debater is catastrophizing and reframe. And so it might be coaching a little bit of interpersonal communication. I often, when I talk about some of the amateur sort of therapist things that debate coaches have to do, one of that is encouraging open and honest communication. And so you might have a chat with the debater who's a little bit more resilient after losses and say, what's going through your mind after a loss? Right? And it will tend to be, well, we learned, there were some things that we were doing well. There were some things that we got better at, and to vocalize those things for the partner. Another one is distraction. Distraction works really well, and trying to find ways to potentially strategically separate the debaters for a minute if one debater needs a distraction. I used to have one of my coaches who, when I was a graduate assistant coach, so I had another coach above me, we were coaching a team, and one of the debaters would kind of get pretty anxious and nervous, and the other debater was cool as a cucumber all the time. And so before a debate round, the coach used to actively look on the internet for like cute dog and cat pictures and would show the cute dog and cat pictures to one of the debaters while the other debater was prepping. And so it might be figuring out strategic roles for people to fulfill on the debate team. And the other thing is just also recognizing that every student is different, and that's okay too. That people have different roles to fulfill on a team, and sometimes somebody's role is to kind of be the negative Debbie Downer on a team, to be the person who is bummed and the other person is okay. And that's okay to have a little bit of that balance, right? And just to try to, accept that they're all, sometimes debaters, like, even you can do all of these sort of like mental coaching techniques and a debater just might not take it, and that's okay. But it's okay to have debaters who have different sort of levels of mental toughness, and give gentle steps of encouragement along the way. Just do everything you can to also just make the debater who's having the tougher time with the L's feel like, even if they are having that tough time, it's okay. There's still a valuable part of the team culture, of what's going on, because that value, I think, will also soften some of that apprehension to L's. And then I think another thing, and this is just in general with coaching psychology writ large, is to really try to hone in on process over results, to make process over results a part of the language that you use all the time to talk with students, and to really demystify the need to have a result-oriented approach, right? There's a difference between goals and results, right? Goals are things you set to try to help you get to a certain level, right? But results are what actually happens, right? And I, as a coach, spend a lot of time talking with my students that I do not care about the results. I care about the process, right? And just letting students know that it is okay if the results don't come. And it's hard though, because we're in a competitive activity, and debaters also know that there's, to a certain degree, results do matter, and they want those results too. So it's tough, but those are kind of my thoughts on that subject. But I'm still learning about how to deal with that all the time, and it's definitely it's an issue. And if it helps just from another coach to another coach, that's a thing I struggle with on the college level too. Any other questions? Yeah, no problem. Give just another minute, just in case there are any other questions, and then I will wrap up here. Okay, thank you for attending. I hope this was helpful.